Hello, everyone. I'm Jeb Gleason-Alired, Content Director of Global Cosmetic Industry. I'm delighted to be hosting today's presentation, The World After, a Beauty Renaissance. Today, we'll learn about the way in which beauty and wellness product marketing has been reinvented into a beauty renaissance. Specifically, we'll hear about actionable opportunities within the trends of microculturalism, mindfulness, digital connection, and mirroring. Our experts today include Robin Along, CEO of Lightbeam Communications Corporation, Cherie Buziak, founder and CEO of BeautyEdge LLC, Kathleen Dillon-Carroll, founder and chief brand strategist for The Branding Clinic LLC, and Sherry Ketting, founder and chief brand strategist, MSLK Incorporated. If you have any questions for our experts, you may submit them via the portal on the right side of your screen. We will address as many questions as possible in our live Q&A at the end of this broadcast. And if you wish to share this presentation via social media, just click the share icon at the bottom of your window. Now, let's get started.
Welcome to The World After, a Beauty Renaissance. We are in a new era as the world figures out how to recover and reinvent from multiple changes that came on us quickly in 2020. We're calling this era the world after, a beauty renaissance. The areas of trends that we'll be covering today are digital discovery and connection, microculturalism, mirroring, and mindfulness. We are women warriors in business. We're a panel of 6 women, expert in diverse and multifaceted areas of business. We came together in the beginning of COVID, and we quickly gelled as a team and coined ourselves WWB. For the last 8 months, we have been coming together, delivering panel discussions, and writing articles specific to the topics we'll be discussing today. Our most recent article is in the digital September issue of GCI magazine, called 6 Ways to Reinvent Marketing in a New Era. On our panel with us today are 4 of the 6 experts delivering insights from market research, digital marketing, brand positioning, and innovative business and product development. 2 experts unavailable today and contributors to our panel presentation are Janice Hart from Bell Flavors and Fragrances and Joy Rude from Edgewell.
Hello. I'm Sherry Ketting, founder, brand strategist, and creative director of MSLK, the beauty branding agency. We help brands tell a cohesive story to their audience across every media they touch, from brand identity to packaging, websites, and digital marketing campaigns. I'm going to share some trends we're seeing in aiding digital discovery and connection with consumers online. We see each media and new technology as a tool to help brands tease out their primary stories and their stories within stories. This helps us evaluate the slew of opportunities in digital media today with an objective lens. We ask not what new media is hot, but what offers the best opportunities to reach our audience and deliver our brand value proposition. Prior to COVID, the majority of sales were still in retail, but the growth opportunity in beauty was online. Quarantine kicked the growth online into overdrive. As of June, eMarketer predicted an 18% increase in sales online. However, in October, they updated that figure to 32.4%. When excluding gas and auto sales, e-commerce will reach 20.6% of all U.S. retail spending this year. Meanwhile, brick-and-mortar sales are predicted to decrease by 3.2%. As a result, businesses large and small are shifting budgets to digital marketing. This surge in demand is causing a strain on consumer attention span and inflating digital marketing costs. Thanks to quarantine, everyone is online. Grandparents are online, kids are online. Competition for eyeballs is high, and we're seeing a historically high cost per impression and cost per click. Consumers are inundated, and we're seeing email open rates decline due to user fatigue. This pivot to prioritizing online sales and capturing online growth is in many ways easier for larger established brands whose credibility and reputation is already known. It's becoming more competitive for growing brands who'd grown used to capturing consumer attention and white space online. Gone are the days when any brand can expect to launch and capture attention organically. With greater scrutiny in online marketing and increased competition, establishing what it takes to stand apart, generate clicks, and consumer purchase has now become harder than ever. The first opportunity to combat these challenges is positioning. Emerging beauty brands will need to be more targeted and strategic in how they approach digital marketing in order to compete with the big brands. Hyper-targeting helps you be more efficient with your digital marketing budget, generate an ROI, and grow your business. Knowing where your audience finds value from your brand is incredibly important. Those values may actually vary and change by age, economic status, lifestyle behaviors, or key benefits your brand offers. For example, a consumer who indulges in your product once or twice a year may be looking for benefits relevant to a special occasion versus a customer who has an underlying need or desire and finds value in using your product regularly. Or a consumer who typically shops for your brand in a natural channel may be primarily concerned with ingredients versus a shopper from a beauty or prestige channel who may be primarily concerned with stylistic tips and tricks for performance. Identifying these needs and values is the first step. Today you're going to hear my colleagues talk about how targeted messaging, imagery, and connections with consumers can warm their hearts and minds. This builds stronger relationships for your brand with consumers. It's true. Consumers are looking to be connected to a community of like-minded peers. Understanding your audience and your potential messaging can help you unlock potential niche platforms that are perfect for you. Platforms such as Reddit, Pinterest, TikTok, Snapchat, or Bing are often great opportunities to reach niche audiences, often overlooked by larger brands. Just a few weeks ago, it was announced that TikTok and Shopify are offering an integration. Shopify merchants who want to advertise on TikTok can now easily target audiences and deploy in-feed shoppable ads directly from Shopify itself. If your product has a younger audience, knows how to leverage sound, or shows a clear transformation, TikTok could be right for you. What is important is that the messaging and imagery you choose mirrors these microcultures so that they too can see themselves in your brand. COVID has left us all starved for that personal connection, now more than ever. This is where the competitive advantage of a niche brand really starts to come into play. Smaller brands continue to have a competitive advantage over larger brands as they can produce rich, engaging, entertaining, and educational content that is highly targeted to each audience. Consumers are inundated today with information and no longer responsive to content the way it's been traditionally served. They demand more authenticity from brands, and they yearn for personalized online experiences. Niche brands can continue hyper-targeted content from advertising all the way onto the product page itself. With fewer products, the cost of creating these targeted pages featuring the same product with unique imagery, messaging, even content targeting these audiences is feasible. You may ask, why don't we see big players doing this? The answer is, with more products, this strategy is simply not sustainable as the costs add up. As a result, the larger, more well-known brands and e-commerce sites don't employ the best practices for conversion and content today. When it comes to advancements in digital marketing, we predict the death of the short product page. You know the one, featuring basic product info, ingredients, maybe some reviews, and products you might also like, but lacking in any other information to build trust, intrigue, entertainment, or education. Most e-commerce product page templates today are just not robust enough to build out the content and features that growing brands really need to convey on a product page in order to convert a sale. Consumers are looking for more romance, storytelling, interaction. A large brand with a strong presence in retail maybe doesn't need to tell its story, as consumers already know the brand and the product. However, all activities have now become centered online. and more than ever, consumers are yearning for those sensorial experiences typically associated with in-person retail experiences. We suggest that in order to aid discovery and digital connections, marketing efforts should drive consumers to product pages that feature a variety of content and imagery custom-tailored to reflect your audience's specific needs. Consider introducing content such as key ingredients and product free-froms, using interactive product finders, tailored quizzes, and live chats, or augmented reality and virtual try-ons, all of which help consumers quickly confirm that your products are perfect for them. Augmented reality has a huge entertainment factor as well, working hard to replace the tester experience previously found at retail. It can now offer tips and how-to tutorials as well. Tips and Tricks is a great place to ensure that the imagery and concerns featured reflect your audience. In fact, lower quality, less polished imagery of your real audience is better than highly retouched models. Salesforce reports that visitors on websites that have user-generated content galleries spend 90% more time on the site. Robust review modules, filterable by age, skin or hair type, geographic location, and photos is another area where users yearn to see the experience that people just like them had with the product. Frequently asked questions that mirror your target audience's needs are important for organic search and real people as well. Remember, people believe in people. Including a feature about your founder or team ensures that consumers understand who you are even if they only visit your product page. The results of clinical trials, user testing, and technical diagrams are harder to personalize but helpful in providing additional reassurance. Being mindful and conscious of your audience's values and giving back to that community adds emotion and trust. Ultimately, A/B testing will help you unlock which features truly aid to converting a sale. We suggest adjusting the priority of features, language used, and model imagery on the product page till you get it right.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you for joining Women Warriors in Business for our presentation, The World After, A Beauty Renaissance. My name is Robin Along. I am the founder and CEO of Lightbeam Communications, a boutique research and brand strategy firm based in New York City. Today, we're exploring microculturalism, an essential component of the emerging beauty renaissance. First, to understand microculturalism and why it's rapidly rising to the forefront, let's look at the big picture and define the big C, which is culture and its influencers. All consumer behavior is grounded in culture. It's what makes us who we are. Culture has been around since the ancient Romans, starting with the great orator and philosopher Cicero, who talked about culture as cultivation of the soul. In fact, archaeological data estimate that culture emerged more than 500,000 years ago, so it's been around for many millennia. There are 7 key influencers of culture. They are physical events such as storms or a pandemic, education such as universities, newspapers, current ideology, socioeconomic and environmental conditions such as those caused by climate change, social change, science and technology, and culture diffusion, all of which one can argue have impacted us simultaneously in 2020 and continue to play a major role in current consumer behavior changes. Today, modern culture is considered to be a set of social rules or guidelines that we live by. When a mass of people subscribe to it, we consider it a macro culture. Think of microculture as cultures within that macro culture. And while microcultures may share some traits, it often has others that may conflict with or be ignored. The underrated power of microcultures is that they are not limited to gender or ethnicity or geolocation, although those are the most obvious. Microculture communities share goals, values, attitudes, etc., that together can harness small power into big movements that ultimately have tremendous impact on brands and consumers alike. Think about feminism and the Me Too movement, or the hashtag BLM Black Lives Matter movement, or Greta Thunberg, the face of the climate change movement. Power has been redistributed from one large group or culture to these smaller microgroups. We saw this most vividly in the recent presidential election, where hyper-targeted microcultural groups of voters in specific areas play a significant role in electing the new U.S. president. Melanie Price, the endowed professor of political science at Prairie View A&M University, underscored this point when she remarked in a recent article featured on CNN that close victories are never about majorities, but the potential of small groups in important states to shape national results. What do these tectonic shifts in power and perception mean for brands in the beauty and wellness categories? Well, beauty perceptions were already shifting away from a Caucasian ideal prior to the pandemic, and now these perceptions are being accelerated. In about 2 decades, U.S. demographic trends show that there will no longer be a white or Caucasian majority. For example, research shows today almost half of the Latinx female U.S.-born population is under the age of 18. Along with the demographic shifts are household income shifts. The average Latinx household income has grown almost 30% since 2017 and is expected to be key to supporting the U.S. economy going forward. As voices of underrepresented, underserved groups continue to rise, they will undoubtedly change the beauty conversation and landscape. Since Fenty Beauty was launched in September 2017, the brand is now valued at $3 billion, with sales of $570 million in the first 15 months of operation. Pat McGrath Labs, a Black-owned brand, is now valued at $1 billion plus. These significant sales numbers have given rise to a plethora of brands that are more inclusive. This suggests major growth opportunities and new audiences for brands. With social media making targeting increasingly easy, convenient, and essential, digital platforms especially have enabled smaller, marginalized populations to find commonalities without sacrificing cultural identity. Therefore, deciphering and understanding cultural nuances to successfully capitalize on emerging opportunities will be key to increasing growth in the future. At Lightbeam, we use a 6-step process to uncover microcultural insights, as outlined on this slide. We help our clients go small to go big. First, we elevate cultural consciousness by deep diving into microcultures because that is often where the solution for problems come from for underserved markets. The other steps are unbiased curiosity, informed observation, doing structured exploration to lead to cultural insight discovery and, of course, validation of those insights. Keeping today's presentation short, out of those 6 steps, Let's focus on the first. Step 1, elevating cultural consciousness. This is by far the most important because it informs and determines an authentic path to relevant and game-changing insights. Without elevating your brand's cultural knowledge base, first, it's like you're in the children's story, the one with the 5 blind men in a room with an elephant trying to determine what the elephant is, and your brand is one of those 5 blind men. Fenty and Drunk Elephant are, of course, great examples of brands catering to niches that blew up here in the U.S. But another global example of this is a hair care brand called Beleza Natural from Brazil, one of the fastest-growing markets for beauty and personal care. Beleza Natural was founded by hair care pioneer Leila Velez, who is from the favelas, the slums in Rio de Janeiro. The Afro-Brazilian population had long been ignored by the traditional hair care industry. In 1993, Leila formed her company after working as a maid, who then became a hairdresser. She spent 10 years creating a breakthrough formula for curly and kinky hair while in the favela. Today, Beleza Natural has grown 142% since inception, with revenues of $680 million U.S. and 15,000 employees. Now, how can your brand become or identify the next Beleza Natural? Cultural insights in particular help brands go hyper-small to listen and decipher complex behavior dynamics, particularly among specific underserved groups. By elevating cultural consciousness first and foremost, brands can learn how to connect more meaningfully with current consumers to increase loyalty, but also better understand and attract potential consumers for more sustained growth. Finally, how does your brand be agile, take advantage of the emerging growth opportunities, and build a larger audience base for a beauty renaissance as this decade unfolds? First, we recommend going hyper-small. Identify cultural nuances that offer opportunities for growth. With targeted exploratory research and cultural listening, brands can discover hard-to-see gaps and avoid pitfalls. Next, use cultural learnings to speak to consumers, not at them. Getting the messaging and tone right is critical to increasing engagement and building trust. Most importantly, make sure to do communication checks to ensure you get all brand messaging right. Third, deciphering cultural codes and constant monitoring is key. Culture is not static. It moves constantly. To pick up on and catch trend waves, knowing what to listen to and when is a skill set that offers a critical advantage. Lastly, understanding cultural lexicon and changing terminology goes hand in hand with deciphering codes that give brands a heads up on future behaviors and shaping brand perceptions today for tomorrow. At Lightbeam, we always say, go small to go big. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking with you about microculturalism and ways your brand can go small to go big.
Thank you. Hi, this is Kathleen Dillon Carroll, and I'll be talking to you today about the trend called mirroring and why it's going to be important in what we're calling the beauty renaissance. I run a firm called the Branding Clinic, and we focus on growing brands by doing brand positioning, consumer insights work. So this trend of mirroring, first let's define it. And it's the importance of a brand to reflect the desires of its users in all elements of its branding. I like to think of branding as anything that appeals to a human's senses. So we have the 5 senses here, and they also involve attitudes and behaviors. As you can see here, the little kitten looking in and seeing a lion reflect back, well, that is what his attitude is, or her attitude. So we've talked about a beauty renaissance, and I just wanted to step back and sort of say some foundation about why we see this happening and why the trends we're talking about today are so important. So first, we've seen in history that after times of austerity or a lack, whether it has been in the Depression, World War I, World War II, the collapse of the market in 1987, or what people are calling the Great Recession, that afterwards they really want to break out and break free and celebrate and act differently. So we may think that we just recently saw this with the dancing in the streets in the United States with the election, but other countries even had these events. So we looked at London and Paris, etc. So when you've gone through a lot of deprivation, there is a desire to break free. And so we think we're going to see this in colors coming back to houses and no longer the gray, the beige, or the gris that we've been seeing, and looking for beauty products to bring that to and romance us. Another point here is just, this lack of resources and sort of, the normalness. It does spur ingenuity and creativity and innovations to fulfill people's desires and needs for change. So we should see a lot of innovation coming out of this period that not only beauty brands, but other brands will have an opportunity to benefit. Okay, to start this out, what is it that we are going to see once we are in the clear out of this COVID period? Well, first and foremost, we have spent a lot of time looking at our navels inside the four walls of our house or condo or apartment. And we're going to want to look in the mirror and see, do we like what we're seeing? And is it a reflection on how we want to live? Because now we are all so much more aware of the inequalities that exist in the world and social justice issues. And I think you're going to see a lot more activism and people demanding what purpose does their brand have in making humanity better. So that's a big shift from the world to the humanity. You're also going to see people wanting to take care of themselves. They have been bombarded by all these, negative messages, whether it be health and love and loved ones and the negative climate, at least in the U.S., of the election cycle, or some may argue all 4 years of the current president's term in office. And they're just going to want to take care of themselves, indulge themselves. Mentioned before, we're going to see this color explosion, both in and out of the house. People want to live. They want to celebrate. No longer do they want the sterile, austere colors that, came out of the big housing crisis, and people wanted to make sure if they had to move, their house, looked good and would be ready to sell quickly. You're going to see a lot greater self-expression in this period of time and reflection. People have gotten more comfortable with who they are, what they want to be, and where they're going. And they're going to be proud of that and wanting to express it. I think the arts are going to grow dramatically. So I could see in beauty care a lot of design coming out of the art world instead of just single-colored products that we typically see. I think one of the most radical shifts we're going to see is a fundamental change in priorities, and that we are going to move much more to the European model, and that's sort of what has happened as a result of the social justice as well as the pandemic isolation. So in Europe, the first priority is the self, then the family, and work is last. And work is just a means for living. And the U.S. historically has actually put work at the top, family second, and the self last. People are not going to tolerate anymore the self last, and having been able to work from home and do different structures, people are not going to want to do those huge commutes anymore. There's going to be a sense of balance that comes back into life and spending time on self-care. Next, work really must be meaningful. We all got a chance, or we know someone who died, or we realize, this thing could get me. So people are reprioritizing and making sure they're doing things that are meaningful to them. And then lastly, people are getting comfortable with the word no. They're going to focus on the few rather than the many. So they're going to cut. They're going to have fewer people they're friends with, fewer organizations they're involved with. They'll cut in family members and who they associate with. They're going to cut in brands as well. So no longer do you need 40 different flavors of Triscuits or 80 different colors of a cosmetic. But now, they'll want the more stable, traditional ones, just like we saw in the pandemic. Original Triscuits were the ones that were sold out, and those tomato basil flavors and things were just left languishing on the shelves. So here are some things that we're telling brands to do in order to grow and be prepared for the Renaissance. First is to invest only in those innovations that matter. Second is to really imbue color and uplifting copy in your brand. This is the time to take away the divisiveness that we have seen. It's a great time for every brand to focus on their brand positioning and make sure it really reflects consumers' beliefs and their desired emotions, and to be ready to launch that on many different platforms and with many consumer segments. Also, we recommend that they find a cause that's going to make humanity better. It's no longer just about making the world better, but it has shifted to humanity. People are really going to want self-care, so this is great for the beauty and wellness industry. People have really changed their hierarchy of how they approach their time and caring. So it's shifted a lot more like the European market. So here in the U.S., traditionally, work has been the first priority, then the family, and then self. But we're going to see the U.S. shift much more to self first. And self is not only caring for yourself to be healthy, as everyone saw with COVID, that people who were less healthy or of higher weights suffered more greatly, but it's also about mindfulness, which you'll hear a little bit more about in today's presentation, and just really taking care of yourself. People are going to cut the number of friends, family members, and things that they associate with and do, as this time of reflection during COVID has really allowed them to decide what matters and being comfortable to say no and cutting the cord. And then lastly, when it comes to the brands, we see evidence that you will do better by cutting the number of SKUs that you have. So say the Triscuits brand, or in makeup there are a lot of different colors, and look to have the fewer ones. One of the things we saw during the pandemic is people wanted the original flavors, the original colors, and you really don't need as many. So less is more.
Welcome to the Mindfulness and Wellness section of our presentation. This is Cherie Buziak, and I'm going to be taking us through different areas of mindfulness and how it's impacting beauty and wellness today. So this is what 2020 feels like. It can remind us of the lyrics from Bohemian Rhapsody. Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality. Open your eyes, look up to the skies, and see. Is there something new we can be looking at now? Before we get started, let's do a mindfulness session. I'm going to ask you to put down your cell phone if you have your cell phone. And if you're not driving, close your eyes and settle in a comfortable position. And we're just going to be taking 3 deep breaths, and I'll guide you through that. Take a deep breath and hold it, and then release it. And one more time, take a deep breath and hold it, and release it. And last breath, take a deep breath and hold it, and release it. So hopefully our mini mindfulness session has relaxed you just a little bit more as we get into looking closer at mindfulness. So let's look at just a year ago at Beauty Accelerate. At that time, I gave a presentation on how we do product development with using our 5 senses, and then also considering incorporating psychological connection. And that psychological connection would come in mindfulness. So if we're combining the two, plus digital, all of this has just catapulted us into 2020 and where we are now in our lifestyle today, incorporating all of these different aspects. So where are we today? We are 8, almost 9 months into this pandemic, and we have become pros at Zoom, becoming Zombies, with zoomed faces and mask-need faces because we're wearing masks all the time. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, our stress levels have gone up tremendously for a number of different reasons. Just looking at some of the statistics, the Google search has gone up 300% between February and May 2020, just searching for how to stay focused. Gaming, of course, has increased. And unfortunately, traffic fatalities have increased as well. If you have taken any trips from 2 to 4 hours on the road, on the highways, it's very evident that cars are passing you by very quickly, even if you're doing a little bit above the speed limit. And then alcohol consumption has also increased. And even for women, it's gone up even higher. There's more that has just transpired and so much to be had and taken into in a very, very short amount of time. So let's take a look at this new beauty renaissance we have, the after of living through all of this and what's to come. Factually, on the left side, there's a tremendous amount of investment and attention to mental health and wellness. Also, organizations are starting to incorporate and be more mindful of mental health and well-being of their employees. That's one of the reasons why I took you through the mindfulness session. Some of you may be experiencing this already if you've gone back to the office, where there's specific time frames where you're cued in to step away from your screen and go to a wellness office or wellness area within your office. The good news is skincare is still very active, and it does have its peaks and valleys, but we do expect it to continue to do very well during this time. And then one other area is fragrance innovation has really stepped in and started to support well-being with even clinical studies. So what are the opportunities? The first one is we are exhausted. This has been a long time. It's not just the pandemic, the global effect, the societal effect, the political effect. We're exhausted people. So there's a potential that is enormous for wellness and mindful products. The world is unsettled, so offering and creating routine for a consumer will be helping them in more ways than one. There's also the business and home office space, which changed overnight. So there's products that are available to be developed in the business space, and then considering the home office space too, whether it is an applicator of an essential oil on the temple area to help reduce stress and calm, or maybe there's a candle that can be used in the home space. Also, even our indoor-outdoor exercises have changed. So a lot of people are tuning into YouTube and doing their exercises in home because they choose not to go back into their gyms, or I'm sure you're seeing even more runners outside. So there's opportunities for products to be developed for them as well. And then taking Wi-Fi out and wellness in. There's something that is going on right now, and you'll be seeing more of it, and it's called digital wellness. And it's not so much saying, okay, I'm going to shut off my social media accounts for a week. It's about how do we engage digitally without overwhelming ourselves. So yes, sleep-enhancing products, but also inclusive of wellness-type products along with sleep that have that kind of drain us from digital, from being online all day. And then lastly, there's opportunities for focused ingredients and fragrances designed specifically to promote physical well-being and positive feelings that our consumers are looking for, whether it's energy or calm, relaxing, or inner strength. So here are some insights to focus in on. Understand that your consumer is going through an emotional change almost every day, and tapping into that and understanding what that could be and what the needs are going to be very important moving forward. I recommend studying more on mindfulness, specifically on neuromarketing and forward thinkers, reading more about forward thinking. Connect to your consumers and their moods. They're changing all the time. And even now, if you have products and you're not in the position to create or develop anything new because of however your company is divvying up their finances, you could take a look at your products and just rewrite the instructions to include mindfulness sessions. In November, in a couple of weeks, I'll be sending out specific mindfulness sessions that incorporate products. And if you're on my mailing list, you'll be able to receive one of these. And it's pretty simple, but you have to do it thoughtfully to understand how your product will connect mindfully with your consumer. And then lastly, take a look at how you can cross-sell products within your categories, whether it's connecting your supplements to a face cream or your personal care products. There's ways that you can cross-sell to create new opportunities in mindfulness for your consumer. And areas to look for in concepts. If you haven't already viewed The Social Dilemma, I highly recommend you take a look. There is a lot to be learned and understood from a neuromarketing perspective. There's also research on digital wellness that's available so that there's different ways to understand how we are so connected almost forcefully connected to digital today because we have to. And our consumer needs to reconnect with themselves during this time. Lastly, one of my favorite websites is the Global Wellness Institute. They have a tremendous amount of information and master classes on different studies from every aspect that you could even think of for wellness, inclusive of mindfulness. So let's connect the trends. Robin spoke to microculturism and how to focus in on your micro-level consumer. Sherry spoke to digital connection and creating that online experience that connects to your audience. Kathleen spoke to mirroring and looked at ways of attitude, behaviors, and societal shifts that matter to target your brand interaction. And I spoke to mindfulness and how to incorporate mindfulness sessions within products to create and support inner strength and well-being for your consumer. Here is our WWB team that presented to you today. Feel free to reach out to them individually, or if you'd like insight as a team, you can reach out to me. And we hope that you received a fair amount of information today to move forward in this beauty renaissance that we're experiencing.
Thank you to our presenters for these great presentations. Now let's get to the questions submitted by our attendees.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our live Q&A. Thank you so much to our wonderful presenters for that fantastic set of talks. I'm really excited to get into some of the questions that we've received from the audience. We have some key topics that quite a few of our attendees have asked us about. So to begin with, the first question is regarding Instagram ad targeting. So, Sherry, maybe you could give us some insights on any tips you have about how to ad target market on Instagram now that hashtags seem to be hidden.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think first of all, it's important to remember that hashtags are really for users that are actively searching, right? You know, you can't just put a hashtag out there and imagine that it's going to magically show up in a user's organic feed. It's for someone who's actively looking for brands that tagged, and then you're really only going to show up in some of the most recent posts at that hashtag. So, when you go to transfer that into paid media, the truth of the matter is you can't target users by hashtags. You have to actually kind of mentally transfer what's the driving user behavior behind that, and think about, what brands might this user be following, or what other groups might this user be following that are related to that hashtag. And that's a good way to be targeted with the same information.
Great, thank you. Our next question here is about reducing the number of SKUs. So how do you reduce SKUs, and what are some of the other options available to brands, especially for retail? And maybe we could start with you, Sherry, and then thank to some of our other panelists.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things to really think about with the SKUs and assortment that you have is how users are shopping, right? And thinking about when somebody loves a product, they want to then think about, okay, well, what do I use next? When we do our research, we see time and time again that consumers have certain keywords that they are really their entry point into a brand. And once they love that product, they're yearning for a real clear routine that they can follow. There's never enough consumer education to make that connection clear. So you might have some SKUs that are kind of outliers that maybe, don't support a clear routine, maybe haven't been performing as well, maybe have kind of grown tired and need some refresh.
Right. Kathleen, can you talk a little bit about this concept as well?
Yeah, sure. The general principle when I worked for Procter & Gamble is we would just routinely cut off the bottom 10 to 20%. So that's just a, simple pro forma way to do it. But I think with today's marketing information and sophistication, you can look and understand who the users are that are using different SKUs, and understand if they're meeting different needs that those consumers have, and sort of think about it as a needs-based segmentation or architecture structure for your brand. And once you understand what that is, you should be able to look strategically at all the SKUs you have and, hey, which ones fit into the current relevant, needs structure that, people have. And particularly in this category where, colors come in and, come out, knowing and understanding that can help you determine, which ones to cut.
Right. And Cherie, do you have any insights into how you go about thinking about this question?
Sure. One of the ways is to really add value to either existing SKUs and combining it. So if you're reducing your SKU set, hypothetically, if you have 5 and you want to go down to 3 and you're getting rid of 2, what is that one product that maybe you have left behind that offers multi-value? Does it offer SPF? Does it offer SPF and protection? Does it offer SPF protection and repair? And re-looking at the story of your brand as well, or your product too, because we have ingredients, as a product developer, we have so many different ingredients available to us, and sometimes we just get stuck on one story. And going back and even working with your labs and saying, as was previously mentioned, if you're reducing the SKU count because of cost and it's just not performing, then go back to the formulas that you have that you want to keep, and then how do you tell the new story? Consumers, when they're in love with the product aesthetically, it's very hard to introduce something brand new by changing what they've already gotten used to. So if you can tell a new story, then I would do something just looking at the IL and creating a new idea around it.
Right, right. And Robin, do you have any thoughts about the considerations around this?
It's a very interesting question because we advocate going small to go big, and the idea of the idea of looking at nuances and serving those sort of nuanced audiences. But the reality is, what has to happen is you have to find the other populations that share those nuances. So you have to sort of turn the problem around a little bit to figure out, okay, even though there's a product that's specifically for a certain type of skin or hair or does a certain benefit, are there other audiences that are actually using it that you don't know about? One of the things that we suggest brands look for is really identity markers when you start to explore cultures, whether it's a mom in a suburb who has one particular culture, whether it's, a young Black woman, what are those identity markers that are actually common or shared that can maybe give that product a new story? As Cherie was saying, is there a new story? If there's not, then, sorry, the axe must fall, for profitability's sake. But I think that's one way of looking at it to try and make sure that before that axe falls, that you're cutting the right product and not just cutting for, just profitability. there might be a hidden opportunity there. You've got to go small to understand those nuances to see where there might be another application. If there isn't, then of course, like I said, the axe must.
Excellent. So we have a question here about niches. So the question is, how do you speak to a niche audience and balance its scalability in a way that will allow you to get into retail? And the question ends, asking if indeed you can be too niche. And actually, Robin, I thought you had some interesting thoughts about that, so maybe we could start with you.
Sure. Yeah, can you be too niche? But we've had this conversation outside of this environment many times, and the biggest example that comes to mind is, of course, in makeup and different shades of makeup. 5 years ago, there weren't as many shades, or maybe 8 years ago, there weren't as many shades. And I'm sure there were times when the brand teams were saying, oh, these shades aren't selling, we need to cut them. And then along came Fenty that blew the door wide open and said, well, wait a minute, here are all these foundation shades. But the moral of the story is melanin. Everyone has melanin in their skin, and it's what gives you your pigment. And there are different shades. Now, back in the day, there was the idea of, the Black population or Hispanic Afro population is only but so much. We're going to cater to the majority, thinking of scaling. And now we realize by going into those niches, there are tremendous product opportunities, because how more highly pigmented skin reacts to things like acne, cleansing, exfoliating, toning is quite different than skin with not as much melanin. And what we're realizing is, and when I spoke about the demographic changes, what I was trying to point out was like, listen, this is coming. Soon this will be the majority, not the minority. But in order to understand it, you have to understand the minority first. You have to go small to understand what those nuances are, because, for example, acne affects Caucasian skin different than it does highly pigmented, Afro-Black skin. Curly hair is another example of that. Very important to understand the nuances first to decipher all of the different problems that exist and solutions that can be growth opportunities, innovation opportunities that potentially will hit even bigger audiences as demographics change. And the thing is, the one thing I want to say before we go is you have to start now. Those communities are very skeptical of big brands. So you have to start now in preparation so that you build trust even before certain products are launched, that they will trust the product when you launch it. And you won't have to start from, zero to get people to trust.
Great. Sherry, I believe you had a couple thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, I think, to expand on Robin's point, it's really important to think about what I was proposing is a unique tool that you have online, right? You have this ability, what Robin unearthed is what people defined as niche when they really got in there and started discovering all, the complexity in there. It wasn't really niche. It was, a larger audience than they thought, and there were, people all colors and shapes and sizes and concerns, and that just the market just kept growing and growing. And so when you start to experiment and explore that on your own site, it really does allow you to be hyper-targeted, to really listen and explore some of those unique flavors. And then, you might find that you actually have several different niche profiles, which as a collective builds you a kind of much larger target audience database. And then when you go to potential retail partners, one of the most interesting and appealing things that our sales team has found is that they want to see that you've done your homework and that you can actually identify who your audience is and show them how that audience aligns with their audience. You know, certain retailers cater to different demographics and price points, and, you know, due to geographic locations, they have unique audience as well that might really clearly align with your audience, and that actually can make you more appealing.
Great.
Yeah, we do one thing, if I could add real quickly, this is Kathleen, is we always ask before you cut a SKU is to understand who the users are and what share of their requirements, like of all their foundation uses, they are placing with your brand in that SKU. And if that number is above 30%, you should not be cutting it.
Interesting.
You know, Jeb, one last thing that I just read, very interesting to this. So P&G, Kathleen's old stomping ground, has a product called Metrobond 24, and it is a sanitizer that provides protection from viruses for 24 hours. Okay, none of us knew a pandemic was coming, but neither did P&G, but they decided to invest in this niche area. This was pre-pandemic, this niche area of like, oh, wait a minute. You know, there are people who are very concerned, germaphobes, about eliminating and protection against viruses for at least 24 hours. Well, lucky P&G, who didn't really think it was going to go anywhere, and now, you know, $200 million in sales later. And this was, what, less than 2 years ago.
Right, right. And before we close, Cherie, did you have anything to add to this line of discussion?
I think as I was listening to the comments, I think one of the other things is consistency as well. But before that, even a category analysis to find out when I see this question as like too niche, and I have a question mark is what is too niche? So how different are you in the nicheness, and how do you platform that? So competitively, I'm assuming that this is too niche, whatever this idea is either too far in advance, which can happen. Sometimes I recall many times developing products or ideas and coming up with concepts, and they were not received well from the marketing team because, you know, being from product development, because it was too soon. It just the audience wasn't ready. Look at, you know, I'm on mindfulness right now. I was talking about this 2 years ago, what happened, the pandemic, and now everybody's shifting to mental health and wellness and such. So I would say stick with your story and be consistent and look at ways that can relate to your audience that's at least a little bit familiar. So with mindfulness, everybody wants to be calm, right? We want to be relaxed. We want to be soothed. So there's some connection there. The mindfulness, the session, whatever, might be a little far-fetched because it's not for somebody yet, but I would say with consistency. And then I think, you know, Sherry spoke a lot about digital, and that's the other thing that happened. We were just catapulted into digital, and if you were online and you pivoted very quickly, this was the perfect opportunity to start before going into retail. Is online and digital. I mean, it's obvious now, but so those are my thoughts.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, that's what retailers want. They want a proof of traction with those audiences, proof of sales and followers.
Excellent. Well, I really want to thank our presenters and our Q&A panelists today. We have Robin Along, Cherie Busiak, Kathleen Dillon-Carroll, and Sherry Ketting. I thank all of you so much for taking part today. And I want to thank all of our wonderful attendees for joining us and for asking these great questions. This presentation and Q&A session will now be available on demand, so you can go back and listen and watch the session. You can also invite colleagues and they can access the presentation as well. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
For having us.
Bye.